It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Zoe Lofgren. We are in her district, essentially. We're in Santa Clara County. We are on our roadshow in Gilroy, California. I want to thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
I'm going to speak with you about an issue that is very important to many Californians, and that is immigration
Right.
and immigration reform.
Right.
It seemed as if last year we had momentum towards immigration reform. The Senate passed by a margin of 68 to 32 immigration reform. What happened in the
What
House?
happened? Well, you know, it's one of these things, you look back and you critique your actions
Right.
and you think, could I have done this better or that better? Honestly, this is one of the times when I think back and I can't think of anything I could have done
Right, sure.
other than what I did to give the Republicans room to act. We had a working group of our own in the House. I worked with some of the leadership team and the Republicans to try
Right.
and help them get to where they
Right.
needed to be. The president was very soft, letting them have
Right.
room to act, and really the speaker kept saying that we would have a reform effort. The sad thing is, the bill that passed the Senate,
Right.
if they'd put it up for a vote in the House, it would have passed.
And I've heard that before.
Yeah.
You're not the only person
Yeah.
that says that. Was there not a discharge petition
There
that was
was.
floating around
There
which would have
was.
required a vote?
The discharge petition is the only way to get around the majority rule in
Right.
the House by countering with majority. And so if 218 members of the House sign this petition, the bill it's about has to get a vote on the
Right.
floor. We didn't get 218 because you need Republicans to sign it. I mean, the Democrats are
Right.
in the minority, and none of them would sign it.
Yet what's interesting is I've spoken with many Republicans, especially those representing portions of California, and they seem to be supportive of immigration reform. Why is it, in your mind, I know you're not a Republican, but in your mind, with their support, which seems sincere, with their constituent support, which seems sincere,
Right.
that we can't get movement even on something like a discharge petition?
Well, I mean, they have to answer for why they would not sign a discharge petition. It's happened in the past. It's a rare procedure, I'll grant you
Right.
that. That's how we got campaign finance reform on the floor for a vote with the discharge petition. So if you really believe in something and your constituents expect you to perform, that's one of the things you do, and none of them would sign it.
Having been a member of Congress for a couple decades, I'm sure you know many Republicans.
I do.
And are friends with many
I
of them
am,
as well. It's one thing to talk to a California Republican, same state, same region, you have a sense of the gravity of the immigration issue.
Well, not all the California Republicans
Fair
are
enough.
in that category.
But
Some are.
Yeah, but I have to think that trying to explain to a Republican from the South, from the Midwest, about, I mean, they have communities of color that are infinitesimal. They have immigrant communities
Right.
that are tiny.
Well, you know, it's all over the board, really. I mean, there are some and it's true, I do have friends who are
Right.
Republicans in the House. We work together on issues when we can. I mean, especially NSA surveillance
Sure.
issues and the like. I've worked with Tea Party
Right.
people. Not all of them are anti-immigrant.
Right.
Some of them have been greatly influenced by the passion of the faith community for immigration reform. The Southern Baptists have been very vocal. The evangelicals have been very vocal.
The Catholic Church.
In addition to the Catholic
Right.
Church. None of them are signing the discharge petition,
Right.
but I think some of them would have voted for the bill had the bill been on the floor. It's just the leadership's decision not to allow a vote. I think it's really not good for the country.
We do know that the president does have the power to engage in action known as executive action.
Right.
Many thought he would engage in that action over the summer.
Right.
That did not happen for reasons it's unclear, let's say.
Right.
Where do we go from here on the question of executive action?
Well, he can't do everything, but there is room in the law for him to take certain steps. I mean, obviously, he can't change the law.
Right.
The law is what it is. But the law, as passed by the Congress and signed into
Right.
law by the past presidents, provides some real discretion, which we are urging him to use. A lot of people don't realize that of the undocumented group in the country, the estimate is, you know, as many as a third or more are married to American citizens. And because we've really messed the law up, they can't get legal. Most people think, well, if you marry an American, you can get, you know, your papers straightened out. Not always the case.
What I have noticed is the issue that is of paramount importance to your friends on the Republican side is not so much, I mean, with some it is the path to citizenship and where they stand in line, but the big question becomes border security, whatever that may mean.
Yeah.
Whatever
I think
that
it's
may
an
mean.
excuse for a lot of people. If you go down to the border, I mean, you cannot hermetically seal the North
border.
American continent.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we've seen that here in California with drug runners. We've tightened security so much on the border that you're seeing people running drugs in boats landing north of Santa Cruz. So
That far up.
That far up. So, I mean, let's be realistic. If we're not going to be able to stop the drug dealers with all of the resources we've put, you know, it's somewhat porous. But if you go down and look, most of the fence is built. You know, I was down in the Rio Grande Valley. They've got sensors buried in the ground. They've got cameras 24/7 with control rooms taking a look at who, is it a cow or is it a person that's intruding? I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not nothing. It's pretty severe.
The other question becomes, these individuals, many of them coming from south of our border, are coming for a better life.
That's right.
So query whether we should be helping to build their native countries. I mean, we provide a lot of foreign aid throughout the world, but whether you support foreign aid or not, you know, side note,
Right.
what can we do in terms of helping to sustain our southern neighbors?
Well, it's interesting because you've seen the immigration flow from Mexico is basically non-existent.
Right.
And that, in large measure, is because of economic growth in Mexico. Now, there are some people, you know, you're coming because your wife is here. That's not about the economy, that's about family. But in terms of people's, you know, economic reasons, there's zero net flow from Mexico. There are certain other countries that are just falling apart.
The
You take Honduras,
the Northern
Central
Triangle, they call it. I mean, that Honduras, what is it, El Salvador?
El Salvador and Guatemala, it's, I mean, imploding. It's violence, it's not only poverty, it's actually more violence and poverty because Nicaragua is actually poorer than Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, but people are fleeing Honduras to go to Nicaragua because of the violence. So it's not just the economic conditions.
And you remember over the summer, our border faced a crisis.
Yes.
And that was a crisis of unaccompanied minors. I mean,
Yes.
If you don't have compassion for anyone, how do you not have compassion for unaccompanied minors?
Yes.
It really spoke to the issue. The issue seems to have, at some level, resolved itself either through PR campaigns or whatever it is. But what was
Well,
that
and also
one?
media attention.
Yeah.
I went down to the Rio Grande Valley to see firsthand what was going on, and you know, it was little kids, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, who had come because it was. Can you imagine how tough it would be to send your 10-year-old off with the hope that they would survive?
Well, I mean, I heard stories, I'm sure you did as well, where a child that was 10 or 11 was told, you become a drug dealer for me or we kill you.
I talked to a grandmother whose grandchildren were going to be taken to become, these are 8, 10-year-old little girls, to be the girlfriends of the gang, and she took those girls and came up to America to save their lives.
Do you know what's happening to these children now?
A variety of things. They are each supposed to receive a hearing to see if they are eligible under the law for a set of relief. If they are, then they will get that.
Isn't the law somewhat unclear as to fleeing from drug violence, whether that
No,
qualifies?
actually the law, there's a whole body of law on asylum, and that's being applied hopefully properly.
Okay.
You know, some will be, actually more than half have been found eligible for relief.
Her name is Zoe Lofgren. She is a congresswoman from Santa Clara County. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for joining us from Gilroy, California. It's California Edition.